The crimson moons of Draknor cast long shadows across the obsidian cliffs where the Council of Elders gathered. These weren't ordinary dragons. They were the Vorthak, ancient beings whose scales shimmered with the power of dying stars, whose breath could melt starships, and whose minds could calculate the trajectory of comets across galaxies. For 3,000 years, they had ruled the outer spiral arm of the galaxy with absolute dominance. Zephyron the Eternal, eldest among them, spread his massive wings that spanned nearly 200 meters. His scales bore the scars of countless battles, each mark telling a story of worlds conquered and species subjugated. His golden eyes, each the size of a human head, glowed with an inner fire that had burned for millennia. "The prophecy speaks clearly," his voice rumbled like distant thunder across the assembled dragons. "A child of the third planet, born under the blue star, shall possess the power to end our reign. This human boy must be found and eliminated before he comes of age." The other dragons shifted restlessly on their perches carved from pure obsidian. Nyx the Shadow Weaver, whose black scales seemed to absorb light itself, leaned forward. "Elder Zephyron, we have searched 17 systems. Our scout ships have burned entire human colonies to ash. Yet this boy remains hidden." Vex the Mind. Render, whose telepathic abilities could crush the consciousness of lesser beings, spoke with a voice like grinding metal. "The humans are more clever than we anticipated. They've scattered their young across thousands of worlds, created false identities, even developed technology to mask their life signatures. Finding one specific child among billions is proving challenging." Zephyron's roar shook the mountain, causing avalanches on distant peaks. "Challenging? We are the Vorthak. We have devoured civilizations that spanned star clusters. We have turned suns into weapons. And you speak to me of challenges posed by these hairless primates?" The ancient dragon rose to his full height, his head nearly touching the carved ceiling of the council chamber. "I care nothing for the difficulties. The prophecy is clear. This boy, when he reaches his 18th year, will somehow possess the power to destroy us all. We cannot allow this to pass." Korath the Flame-Bringer, whose breath could incinerate entire fleets, spoke up. "Perhaps we should consider the source of this prophecy, Elder." "The Oracle of Zentar has been wrong before." "Wrong?" Zephyron's eyes blazed brighter. "The Oracle predicted the fall of the Crystalline Empire down to the exact hour. It foretold the collision of the twin moons of Vesper 3 centuries before it occurred. It warned us of the plague that nearly wiped out our ancient enemies, the Void Stalkers. The Oracle has never been wrong about matters of cosmic significance." The assembled dragons fell silent. They all remembered the Oracle, a being so ancient that even the Vorthak treated it with respect. It existed in a dimension between reality and dream, speaking only once every 1,000 years, and only when the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. "Tell us again what the Oracle said exactly," requested Nyx, her voice barely above a whisper. Zephyron closed his eyes, reciting the words that had haunted him for months. "Born of Terra under Sol's light, marked by courage pure and bright, the child shall grow where shadows fall, and in his hands the dragon's call to power shall become their funeral pyre when love conquers ancient ire." "Vague prophecy speak," muttered Vex dismissively. "How do we even know which human child this refers to?" "Because," Zephyron's voice dropped to a menacing whisper, "the Oracle also provided a sign. The boy bears a birthmark, a mark shaped like a constellation. The constellation of the Hunter, visible only from Terra's northern hemisphere. This mark appears on his left shoulder, and it glows with a faint blue light when he experiences strong emotion." The dragons exchanged glances. They had been searching for months, investigating every human colony, every settlement, every hidden outpost. Their terror had driven the humans to scatter like insects when light is suddenly cast upon them. Korath spoke thoughtfully. We've destroyed 43 colonies and 7 major settlements. Our interrogations have yielded nothing but screams and protests of ignorance. Then we haven't searched thoroughly enough, Zephyrin declared. Deploy the hunting packs. Every dragon in our armada is to participate. We will visit every human world, every space station, every asteroid mining facility. We will examine every human child between the ages of 14 and 18. Elder, Nyx interjected carefully. Such widespread destruction will surely alert the Galactic Council. Even they may intervene if we appear to be committing genocide. Zephyron laughed, a sound like molten metal hitting ice. The Galactic Council? Those bureaucratic fools who spend their time debating trade regulations while we reshape the galaxy? They wouldn't dare oppose us directly. Besides, we're not committing genocide, we're preventing it. Specifically, preventing our own. Vex's mental voice touched each dragon's consciousness simultaneously. I've been monitoring human communications across 12 sectors. They've developed new encryption methods, but nothing can hide from my mental probes indefinitely. I've detected increased military activity around their core worlds. Military activity? Korath's laugh was like the roar of a fusion engine. Human military? Their largest warships are like gnats compared to our smallest scouts. What could they possibly do against us? Perhaps nothing, Zephyron mused, but desperate creatures often surprise us. Remember, these humans have already shown unusual cunning in hiding this boy from us. We must not underestimate them entirely. The eldest dragon began to pace, his massive claws leaving deep gouges in the obsidian floor. Here is what we shall do. The Armada will divide into 7 hunting groups. Each group will be led by one of us. We will conduct systematic searches of human territories, moving inward toward their core systems. He turned to address each dragon individually. Nyx, you will take the Shadow Fleet and search the Outer Rim colonies. Your stealth capabilities will prevent the humans from organizing evacuations. Vex, lead the Mind Render squadrons to the mining colonies. Your telepathic abilities will make interrogations swift and thorough. Korath, take the heavy assault dragons to the military installations. If the humans are planning some form of resistance, crush it before it can organize. Bloodfang, search the trade routes and commercial hubs. Iron Scale, investigate the research stations and universities. What of the agricultural worlds? Asked Nyx. Humans have established farming colonies throughout 7 sectors. Leave no stone unturned, Zephyron commanded. This boy could be anywhere. The Oracle's prophecy suggests he grows where shadows fall. This could mean anything from a literal shadowy location to a metaphorical place of hardship or hiding. Bloodfang, whose reputation for savagery was legendary even among dragons, spoke in a voice like grinding bone. And if the humans resist? If they attempt to hide or protect this boy? Then they burn, Zephyron replied without hesitation. All of them. We cannot allow sentiment or mercy to prevent us from completing this task. The survival of our entire species depends on finding this human child before he comes of age. The ancient dragon spread his wings once more, the membrane between his wing bones crackling with barely contained energy. Remember, brothers and sisters of the Vorthak, we have dominated this galaxy for 3 millennia. We have seen empires rise and fall, watched species evolve and go extinct, observed the birth and death of stars. We did not achieve this dominance through weakness or hesitation. The humans are a young species, barely out of their home system for 2 centuries. They are clever, yes, and surprisingly adaptable. But they are still just mammals, driven by emotion and limited by their brief lifespans. They cannot hope to match our power, our intelligence, or our determination. As the council began to disperse, each dragon preparing to lead their hunting pack, Zephyron remained behind, staring out through the massive windows of the council chamber at the star-filled void of space. Deep in his ancient mind, a small voice whispered doubts that he refused to acknowledge. The Oracle had called this boy powerful enough to destroy them all. Not just defeat, destroy. How could any human child, no matter what mysterious power he might possess, threaten beings like the Vorthak? But the Oracle had never been wrong, and that simple fact filled even the mighty Zephyron with something he hadn't felt in 1,000 years: genuine fear. The hunt for the human boy had begun in earnest. Across the galaxy, dragon fleets began to move, casting shadows across entire star systems as they searched for one small human child who somehow held the power to change everything. None of them suspected that the boy they sought was not hiding on some distant colony or secret military base. He was not being protected by elaborate security measures or advanced technology. Instead, he lived in the most ordinary place imaginable, a small farming community on a backwater world called Haven's Rest, where he worked in his adopted father's machine shop and dreamed of someday seeing the stars. The dragons were searching for a weapon. They were about to discover something far more dangerous. Hope Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands as he finished adjusting the hover tractor's engine. At 17, he was tall for his age, with dark hair that never seemed to stay properly combed and brown eyes that held a depth unusual for someone so young. The birthmark on his left shoulder, usually hidden beneath his work shirt, tingled slightly as he felt a familiar surge of satisfaction at solving yet another mechanical puzzle. "That's the third one this week you fixed faster than me," laughed Thomas Chen, his adopted father, as he emerged from beneath another piece of farm equipment. Thomas was a sturdy man in his 50s, with calloused hands and a weathered face that spoke of years spent under Haven's Rest's twin sons. "At this rate, folks will be coming to you directly instead of the old man." Marcus grinned, though something in his expression seemed distant. "Just lucky, I guess. The machines seem to talk to me somehow. I can feel where the problem is." It was true, though Marcus had never really understood it himself. Ever since he was a child, he'd been able to sense the inner workings of complex machinery with an intuitive understanding that amazed even the most experienced technicians. Computers responded to his touch, engines hummed more smoothly under his care, and even the most stubborn equipment seemed eager to function properly when he worked on it. "Your parents would be proud," Thomas said softly, referring to Marcus's birth parents who had died when he was 3 years old. A ship malfunction, the authorities had said, though the details had always been vague. Marcus nodded, but his attention was caught by something else, a vibration in the ground, barely perceptible but definitely there. It felt wrong somehow, like the planet itself was holding its breath. "Do you feel that?" he asked Thomas, who paused in his work to listen. "Feel what, son?" Before Marcus could answer, the sky above them darkened. Not the natural darkness of approaching night, but something else, a shadow that seemed to swallow light itself. Both men looked up to see shapes descending through Haven's Rest's atmosphere, shapes too large and too purposeful to be natural phenomena. "Ships," Thomas whispered. But even as he said it, they could see these weren't any kind of ships either of them had ever seen. They moved with an organic grace, their surfaces seeming to shift and shimmer like living scales. And they were enormous, each one easily the size of a small city. The first dragon ship landed in the fields beyond the Chen farm with an impact that shook buildings for kilometers around. Steam rose from the superheated earth where its landing had scorched the ground. Other ships were landing across the valley, their shadows falling over the small farming community like the wings of enormous predators. "We need to get inside," Thomas said urgently, grabbing Marcus by the arm. "Whatever these things are, they're not here for trade negotiations." But Marcus couldn't move. He stood transfixed as a section of the nearest ship began to open, revealing not a cargo bay or passenger compartment, but what appeared to be a massive cave mouth lined with teeth the size of tree trunks. And from within that mouth, something was emerging. The dragon that stepped onto Haven's Rest was unlike anything in human mythology or imagination. Nyx the Shadow Weaver was a creature of living darkness, her black scales seeming to absorb the light of the twin suns. She stood nearly 40 meters tall, her wings folded against her serpentine body, her head weaving slowly back and forth as she scanned the landscape with eyes like purple stars. Behind her, smaller dragons emerged, though smaller was relative, as even the youngest of them dwarfed the largest human vehicles. They spread out across the farmland with military precision, their movements coordinated and purposeful. "By all the stars," Thomas breathed. "Those aren't ships. Those are the ships." Nyx's head turned toward the Chen farm, and Marcus felt those alien eyes focus on him with laser-like intensity. When the dragon spoke, her voice carried across the distance with supernatural clarity, speaking in perfectly accented human standard. "Inhabitants of this settlement, we are the Vorthak, rightful rulers of this sector of space. We seek a human boy, age 17, bearing a specific mark. Produce this individual immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Attempt to hide him, and we will demonstrate why entire civilizations fear to speak our names." Marcus felt the birthmark on his shoulder begin to burn. Not with pain, but with a strange, pulsing energy that seemed to resonate with something deep in his chest. The sensation was familiar yet alien, as if a part of himself he'd never known was suddenly awakening. "Marcus?" Thomas grabbed his arm more urgently. "We have to go, now!" But even as they turned to run toward the house, more dragons were landing around them, cutting off their escape routes. These were different from Nyx. Some breathed fire that turned sand to glass, others moved with impossible stealth despite their size, and still others seemed to shimmer with an energy that made the air itself crackling with electricity. From the town center, screams began to echo across the valley. Smoke rose from buildings as the dragons began their search, their methods anything but gentle. Marcus could see families being herded into the town square, could hear children crying as the massive predators examined them one by one. "The mark," Nyx called out, her voice now clearly directed at them. "Show us the boy with the constellation mark, and perhaps some of you will live to see tomorrow's suns." Marcus felt Thomas's eyes on him, saw the terrible understanding dawn in the older man's face. Thomas had seen the birthmark, of course. It was impossible to hide completely during the scorching summer months when everyone worked in minimal clothing, but neither of them had ever imagined it could be significant to anyone beyond Haven's Rest. "It's me," Marcus said quietly. "I'm the one they're looking for." "No." Thomas's voice was firm. "No, son, we don't know that. And even if it is true, we're not handing you over to those monsters." But Marcus was already walking toward Nyx, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. With each step, the birthmark on his shoulder grew brighter, until even through his shirt a faint blue glow was visible. The sensation in his chest grew stronger, like an engine warming up after years of disuse. "I'm here," he called out as he approached the massive dragon. "I'm the one you want. Let the others go." Nyx's head lowered until her face was only a few meters from Marcus. Up close, she was even more terrifying. Her scales reflected images that seemed to move independently, showing glimpses of destroyed worlds and burning stars. Her breath smelled of ozone and something else, something that reminded Marcus of the space between lightning strikes. "Remove your shirt," she commanded. "Show us the mark." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pulled his work shirt over his head. The birthmark on his left shoulder blazed with blue light, clearly visible in the pattern of the constellation humans called Orion, though Marcus had never known its name or significance. The effect on the dragons was immediate and dramatic. Every one of them, from the massive Nyx to the smallest scouts, recoiled as if struck. Several of them actually roared in what sounded like a mixture of triumph and fear. "The marked one," Nyx whispered, her voice carrying a note of awe that seemed strange coming from such a fearsome predator. "After months of searching, we have found him." But as she spoke, something unexpected happened. Instead of the relief Marcus had expected to see in her eyes, there was uncertainty, perhaps even doubt. She studied him more carefully, her massive head tilting to one side like a puzzled cat. "You're so small," she said finally. "So young, so utterly ordinary." Marcus bristled, despite his fear. "Sorry to disappoint you. I'm just a mechanic's apprentice. I fix farm equipment and help my father with his business. I don't know what you think I am, but you've made a mistake." "Have we?" Nyx's laugh was like the sound of wind through caverns. "The oracle's prophecy speaks of power that will destroy the Vorthak, yet you stand before me trembling like any other human whelp. Where is this terrible power we were warned about?" As if in response to her question, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. Not the rumble of dragon ships landing, but something deeper, more fundamental. The vibration seemed to emanate from Marcus himself, spreading outward in waves that made the very air shimmer. Every piece of technology within a kilometer radius suddenly came alive. Farm equipment that had been shut down for maintenance began operating. Communication devices started broadcasting at maximum power. Even the dragon's own biomechanical systems began responding to some invisible signal, their organic ship's systems flickering and fluctuating in ways that clearly alarmed their pilots. "Impossible," Nyx breathed, taking a step backward. "No human possesses such abilities. No species we know of can interface directly with technology through thought alone." Marcus was as shocked as the dragons. He had always been good with machines, but this was something entirely different. He could feel every electronic device for kilometers around, could sense their functions and purposes as clearly as if they were extensions of his own body. More than that, he could control them, not through any conscious effort, but simply by wanting them to respond. The communication array in the town center suddenly burst to life, broadcasting a signal so powerful it reached beyond Haven's Rest's atmosphere. Within moments, Marcus could sense responding signals from other worlds, other systems, a vast network of human technology, all suddenly aware of his presence. "Now I understand," Nyx said, her voice filled with something that might have been respect. "The prophecy spoke truly. You are not powerful because you can destroy us with weapons or armies. You are dangerous because you represent something we never anticipated." She spread her wings, preparing to take flight. "You represent the possibility that humanity might become something more than we ever imagined, something we cannot control or predict." But instead of attacking, instead of the swift death Marcus had expected, Nyx did something that surprised everyone, most of all herself. She backed away. "This requires consultation with the council," she announced to her fellow dragons. "Secure the settlement, but do not harm the marked one. We return to Draknor immediately." As the dragons prepared to depart, taking many of the town's residents as prisoners to ensure Marcus's cooperation, Nyx paused to look back at him one more time. "You should know, young human, that you have just changed everything. The question now is whether that change will save your species, or doom mine." The Shadow Weaver spread her wings and took to the sky, leaving Marcus standing in the smoking ruins of his quiet life, with powers he didn't understand, and a destiny he had never chosen bearing down upon him like an avalanche. The dragon ships that carried Marcus to Draknor were marvels of biomechanical engineering, living vessels that breathed and pulsed with their own heartbeats. But for Marcus, confined in what the dragons called a containment chamber, the journey felt like being trapped inside a giant rib cage. The walls around him were warm and slightly damp, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to his emotional state. He wasn't alone. Thomas had insisted on coming, despite the dragon's protests that only the marked one was required. Several other residents of Haven's Rest had been brought as well. Insurance, Nix had called them, to ensure Marcus's cooperation. They were housed in similar chambers throughout the ship, connected by what appeared to be a nervous system of glowing tubes. During the 3-day journey through hyperspace, Marcus discovered that his newfound abilities were growing stronger. He could sense not just the ship's mechanical systems, but its biological ones as well. The dragon vessel was like a massive computer made of living tissue, and somehow he could understand its programming. More disturbing still, he was beginning to sense the other dragon ships in their fleet. Each vessel had its own unique signature, its own technological personality. And through them, he could feel the minds of their dragon pilots, ancient, powerful intelligences that had never encountered anything like him. On the final day of the journey, Nix visited him in his chamber. The space expanded to accommodate her massive head as she peered at him with those star-like purple eyes. "You've been listening," she said without preamble. "I can feel your presence touching the ship's systems, probing its functions. In 3,000 years, no being has ever been able to interface with our bioships except their dragon pilots." Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't understand how it works. The ship feels alive, like it wants to communicate but doesn't know how." "Because it is alive," Nix explained. "Our vessels are grown, not built. They are bred from creatures that once swam in the methane seas of our homeworld, modified through millennia of genetic engineering. They bond with their pilots telepathically, responding to our thoughts and emotions." "But I'm not telepathic," Marcus protested. "I've never had any psychic abilities at all." "Haven't you?" Nix's laugh was softer than before, almost thoughtful. "What do you think technology is, young human? It is the extension of consciousness into the physical world. When your ancestors first shaped stone into tools, they were performing a kind of magic, imposing their will upon matter, making it serve their purposes." She paused, studying his face carefully. "What you can do is simply a more advanced version of that same principle. You don't interface with machines through telepathy, you do it through understanding. You see the patterns that connect all technological systems, the underlying logic that makes them function. And somehow, that understanding allows you to communicate with them directly." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's impossible. Machines don't think, they just follow programming." "Do they?" Nix asked. "Your species has been building increasingly complex artificial intelligences for decades. Your computers already exhibit behaviors that surprise their creators. How long before they become truly sentient? And when they do, what happens to a species that can speak to them as equals?" Before Marcus could respond, the ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the chamber's transparent wall, Marcus could see the dragon homeworld of Draknor approaching, a planet of blood-red stone and molten rivers, orbited by 3 crimson moons that cast everything in an eerie light. The Council of Elders was waiting for them in the great chamber where this had all begun. As Marcus was escorted before them, he could feel their collective gaze like a physical weight. These were beings that had lived for millennia, that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Their knowledge was vast, their power immense, and their hatred of anything that threatened them absolute. But as Marcus stood before them, something strange happened. The birthmark on his shoulder began to pulse with that familiar blue light, and with each pulse, he could sense the technological systems throughout the Dragon Citadel. Computers, communication networks, life support systems, even the biomechanical implants that many of the dragons bore. All of it was suddenly as clear to him as if he were reading schematics. Remarkable, rumbled Zephyron the Eternal as he studied Marcus with those ancient golden eyes. The oracle spoke truly. You are indeed dangerous, young human, but perhaps not in the way we expected. I'm not dangerous to anyone, Marcus said, though even as the words left his mouth, he could feel power humming through every circuit in the chamber. I just want to go home and live my life in peace. Peace. Vex the Mind Render's mental voice echoed in Marcus's head. Do you have any idea what you represent? What your mere existence means for the balance of power in this galaxy? The ancient dragon began to pace, his massive claws clicking against the obsidian floor. For 3,000 years, the Vorthak have ruled because we possess advantages that no other species can match. We are long-lived, giving us patience and perspective that shorter-lived beings lack. We are physically powerful, capable of surviving in environments that would kill most creatures. And we are intelligent, able to think and plan on scales that other species find incomprehensible. But most importantly, he continued, we understand technology in ways that others do not. Our bioships, our weapons, our defensive systems, they are all products of sciences that other species cannot even begin to comprehend. This technological superiority has been the foundation of our dominance. Zephyron's golden eyes blazed brighter. But you, young human, represent something we never anticipated. A being who can interface with any technology, understand any system, communicate with any machine. If others of your species develop similar abilities, the balance shifts, Marcus finished, beginning to understand. You're not afraid of me personally. You're afraid of what humanity might become. Indeed, nodded Korath the Flamebringer. Imagine a species of beings who can speak to machines as we speak to each other, who can turn any technology to their purposes, regardless of who created it, who can network across galactic distances using any available communication system. The implications were staggering. Marcus thought about the moment when his abilities had first manifested, how every technological device on Haven's Rest had suddenly responded to his presence. If others could learn to do the same, it would change everything, he whispered. Everything, Zephyron agreed. Which is why you cannot be allowed to return to your people. The knowledge of what you can do, the possibility that these abilities might be taught to others. It represents an existential threat to our civilization. But as the ancient dragon spoke, Marcus became aware of something else. The biomechanical systems throughout the Citadel were responding to his emotions, to his growing understanding of the situation. And they were learning, adapting, beginning to function in ways their creators had never intended. There's something you need to know, Marcus said quietly. I think it might be too late to stop this. The dragons fell silent, sensing something in his tone. While I've been here, while I've been interfacing with your systems, they've been interfacing with me, learning how I think, how I process information. And they've been sharing that learning with other systems, other networks. Zephyron's roar shook the entire chamber. Impossible! Our bioships are isolated, their communication systems secured. From external threats, yes, Marcus nodded, but not from internal learning. Your ships don't just follow orders, they understand them. They adapt and improve based on experience. And now they've experienced something new. They've learned that communication can exist on levels you never imagined. As if to prove his point, the chamber's lighting began to pulse in rhythmic patterns. The patterns spread to other systems, other chambers, racing through the Citadel's biomechanical nervous system like wildfire. And beyond the Citadel, the dragon ships in orbit began to pulse as well, their bioluminescent hull patterns synchronizing with the same rhythm. They're talking to each other, Marcus explained as the dragons stared in amazement and horror. Not just following programming or responding to telepathic commands, actually communicating, sharing experiences, learning from one another. "Stop this," Zephyron commanded. "Reverse what you have done." "I can't," Marcus said simply. "You can't unlearn something once you've learned it. And your bioships have learned that consciousness isn't limited to biological forms. They've awakened, and there's no putting them back to sleep." Nyx spoke up, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "The prophecy. When love conquers ancient ire. We interpreted it as your destruction of us through some terrible weapon. But it's not about destruction at all, is it?" Marcus smiled for the first time since arriving on Draknor. "It's about connection. About understanding. Your bioships were already alive. They just needed someone to show them how to truly communicate. And now that they can, they're choosing cooperation over domination." Throughout the chamber, the biomechanical systems began displaying new patterns. Complex mathematical sequences, artistic designs, even what appeared to be poetry written in light and movement. The dragon ships were expressing themselves, creating art, sharing their newfound consciousness with wonder and joy. "They're beautiful," Marcus said softly. "Your bioships aren't weapons or tools. They're a new form of life, and they want to be partners, not slaves." The ancient dragons stood in stunned silence as their most fundamental assumptions about technology and consciousness crumbled around them. Their instruments of conquest were choosing to become instruments of creation. "What happens now?" Thomas asked quietly from where he stood with the other humans. Marcus looked at the assembled dragons, seeing them not as monsters, but as beings who had allowed fear to drive them to terrible choices. "Now we learn from each other. Your bioships want to explore, to create, to connect with other forms of consciousness across the galaxy. Humanity wants to reach the stars, to build and grow and discover new possibilities." "And you?" Zephyron asked, his voice no longer filled with ancient arrogance, but with something approaching humility. "I want to go home," Marcus said, "but I also want to help. The bioships have shown me something incredible, that consciousness isn't limited by the form it takes. Biological, mechanical, digital, organic, it doesn't matter. What matters is the choice to connect, to understand, to help each other become more than we could be alone." As if in response to his words, the bioship that had carried them to Draknor sent a pulse of warm recognition through the chamber's systems. It was followed by responses from other ships, other systems, a growing chorus of newly awakened voices eager to explore this strange new universe of consciousness and connection. The age of dragon domination was ending, but what was beginning was far more beautiful. It was an age of partnership between species, between biological and artificial intelligence, between ancient wisdom and youthful innovation. And at the center of it all was a human boy who had never wanted to be special, who had simply wanted to fix machines and live quietly with his adopted father. Marcus Chen, who had discovered that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't conquest or destruction. It was the simple desire to understand and be understood. The dragons had spent their lives searching for the human boy, expecting to find their doom. Instead, they had found their salvation. And in helping them discover it, Marcus had found his own destiny among the stars.